Vidisha Maitra. Now I request, yeah, yeah. Now I request, now I request Secretary Sahitya Academy to felicitate all the participants with Gamsha. Now I request Secretary Sahitya Academy to deliver welcome address.
Namaskar. Sri Amarendra Kadwaji, former Secretary Minister of External Affairs and scholar, poet, Sri Abhay K, Ms. Anju Ranjan ji, Sri Arun Kumar ji, Sri Suresh Goyal ji, and Vidisha Maitra, and friends. I am glad to welcome all of you for this panel discussion on diplomacy literature that will be moderated by Sri Amarendra Kadwaji. Friends, this is the first time that we have added this segment in our Festival of Letters. We never had this kind of subject throughout in the history of Sahitya Academy. This is the first time. So this is the experiment. So if we succeed, then we will continue with this particular session in our future festivals as well. Friends, literature is one of the most powerful and dominant expressions of culture of the country. Of course, there are other mediums of cultural expressions, but literature, whether it is written or oral, has the ability to reach masses without any aid. I'm not batting for literature because I represent Sahitya Academy, but it is a reality, a song or story, written or oral, has the ability to captivate the masses even when they do not seek it. Every culture, every community, every nation has many unique elements, and those elements are the soft power of that particular community or nation. When such a soft power is leveraged and promoted in other countries and cultures, is it gives additional power to the country. Since literature captures those unique elements and also any kind of expression of those elements, be it a painting or a dance or a play or any other form, literature gives enormous power to the country that wishes to promote its soft power abroad. Diplomats who are in the missions abroad use such literature available promoting unique elements of the culture of the country as part of diplomacy. One of the finest examples of is how Australia and Australian diplomats leveraged within their country and then pitched overseas the vast and diverse species of flora and fauna of that particular country. How it captivated and attracted large number of people from all over the world to Australia is history, and I need not to repeat here. Literary diplomacy becomes even more potent in the hands of diplomats who are writers and connoisseurs of art and nature. We are very fortunate to have with us today diplomats who are scholars and writers. I am sure it will be a fascinating session of discussion on literature as a tool for diplomacy and how these wonderful scholars are and will be utilizing the literature for promoting soft power of India abroad. We are privileged to host this panel discussion on diplomacy literature, and there are many aspects to this topic, and we are very lucky to have all these wonderful scholars who are also diplomats. Since there can be many representations from multiple angles on this topic, we would love to have these discussions in the coming years of Festival of Letters, as I already mentioned, and we will try to have as many diplomat scholars as possible to discuss diplomacy and literature. With these few words, I am glad to welcome all of you for this special session that we have added in the Festival of Letters for the first time. And now I request Amrendra Katwaji to take over the mic, and the rest of the thing he will handle it.
Uh, Thank you. I will add to what Secretary General said. Sahitya Academy organizes number of writers meet with various countries. Though in the festival later, that component was not incorporated. Every year he organizes so many events that one is happy to meet. Recently I met Iranian writer. We are meeting the Kazakh writer. Uh, Let us welcome Ambassador Suresh Goyal, Ambassador Arun Kumar Sahu, Ambassador K. Abhay, fellow diplomat Anju Ranjan, fellow diplomat Vidisa. See, when you are talking about diplomats, what comes to our mind is international relations. Many diplomats write lots of books on international relations. A recent statistic says every year diplomats write more than 1723 books on international relations all over the world. Uh, International relations has become literature now following Ukraine event, Russia-Ukraine war. Why so? One author says that can we use the tools of international relations to manipulate, to influence people's mind in favor of peace? What can literature do, like if it can bring peace? That is one part. Other part is literature is based on personal experience, interaction with people, what you see, what you visualize, what you experience, and then what you intellectualize. Diplomats, though for a long time it was they said diplomacy and literature was anathema. Lots of diplomats are poets, novelists, and authors. For example, today there is an organization called Piraeus in Greece. They are doing a massive survey, massive range of publication on diplomacy and literature with following questions. Are diplomacy and literature two concentric circles? Second, how is the diplomat writer experience conveyed in his literature? Third, what cultural practices are being used by diplomat authors? Fourth, who serves as a source of inspiration for writers, diplomats? Fifth, does language become a vehicle of culture as diplomats move from language sources to other language sources? Sixth, what are the preferred literary themes, whether it is novel, poetry, essay, international relation, the diplomat writer prefer? Seventh, how does diplomacy inspire literature? Last, what is the writer's diplomat's contribution helps in improving international relations? These are the topics which Piraeus Institute is going to develop into books. I have given all your names. Piraeus will approach all of you, including Sahitya Academy. Therefore, today's discussion We have some. They are all of them are eminent authors, eminent writers. Basically, we don't have much time because there are lots of events being organized by Science Academy. There are two, three questions I'll ask each one of them. First question is, why do the person writes? What part of fiction does not matter, whether it is poetry, novel, whatever. Two, where does the influence comes from? Does his participation in diplomatic service has any way influenced his writing career? Three, linkage between personal life, professional life, and literature. Let us start with that, and everybody will have 8 minutes. Then we'll throw the floor open. Thank you. One thing I forgot, some of the names. They have also come to Rabindra Bhavan. Octavio Paz, his India writings, in a poem, he has said, "Please forget for the time being, I am the diplomat who plays with emotions, plays with the words. These words, what I'm laying before you, are literature unmade, but has to be made in your mind." Thank you. I'll invite now Ambassador Suresh Goyal.
Uh, Thank you very much. Can I call you Ambreen rather than Mr. Prabhu or Mr. Chairman? We have been together so long that I still think of our really being friends, colleagues, more than anything, friends. We have gone through ICCR, not together, but at different times, but with the same purpose. Ambreen, thank you very much. Thank you, Abhay, the diplomat writer here, Sahuji, and everybody else on the dais here. Uh, I don't know what question do I need to answer. No, no, no. Okay, all right. Diplomats' view on literature. Now, we need to really think about what diplomacy is all about. Normally, the chair indicated that international relations, we need to demystify what international relations is all about and what diplomacy is all about. First of all, international relations is not just about conversations between countries and their governments. International relations is not about Russia Ukraine war only. International relations is also about what happened in Turkey and Syria and how India sent lots of humanitarian assistance to those countries. International relations is also about helping people in need when pandemic took place and we send them medicine. International relations is not about just countries. Countries' constitutions, you pick up any constitution and you will find that constitution is for the people, by the people, whether it is communism or whatever it is. But countries are about people and therefore the international relations is about people. By virtue of being about people, I'm just basically putting it very simply, and by virtue of the international relations about being people, diplomacy is about understanding people, developing conversations between people, and correspondingly between the government, and importantly, developing understanding at a very basic level, knowing what they are all about. Today, uh, why are India and Pakistan not talking to each other? It's simply because we are thinking at cross purposes. For us, Pakistan is sponsoring international terrorism across the borders. For Pakistan, India is in occupation of Jammu and Kashmir, and they, I would say, correctly speaking, Pakistan does not look at the history. And for us, whatever Pakistan might do in terms of resolving the issue of terrorism, we are not happy because it's not able to convince the people. Therefore, point number one, international relations is about people and developing understanding between people. Now, if it is about the developing understanding, what do we do about that? Conversations, understanding their emotions, understanding where they come from. Very often you will hear that when people from India go to Pakistan or Pakistani people come to India, they are very, very good friends. At a people level, they are very good friends. Why does this friendship not translate into a national level understanding? The issue really is that not sufficient scope has gone to convert those understandings. But if I come to now the issue of developing this understanding, how does literature help? And therefore, I'm broadening the scope of diplomacy. I'm not talking about signing those documents, joint agreements, statements. Those will come, and they will go into a cupboard where they will remain there for years to come unless they're translated into action. But the basic thing is literature is important because, as somebody said, literature is a mirror into the soul. And therefore, if you want to understand people in any country, you have to see their folk literature, you have to say the literature besides the performing arts and everything else. But the stories which are written, which the children read, small children, when they read the stories, the impact that they leave on the children, they grow up with that impact. That is how they become people who carrying the memories of those stories. So we have to use literature to develop those emotions, build up on that understanding, and then carry on from there. So diplomacy has to go on literature really. Let me give you examples. Uh, for the last several years, more than a decade, except during the pandemic, I have been involved with the literary festival done by Foswal, Ajit Kaur. All of you know her. And she does it single-handedly with the cooperation of Sahitya Academy. At one time when I was DG ICCR, I came with her. We provided support. Now that one festival in different places did more than what the two governments could do to bring the writers of the seven SARC countries together on the same platform, Sufiana traditions, where they actually share experiences, where they share emotions. Now, when you talk to each other, translate those conversations into the experiences and people level coming together, that actually wins half the battle. And that is where the success of diplomacy lies. Uh, it's now going to be called BIMSTEC. Tagore, bright example of Tagore. I mean, there are books and books about what Tagore did. Victoria Ocampo, legendary conversations. As a writer, he traveled a lot. And for a diplomat, traveling and writing is the best possible combination because you write about the impressions you're in the country that you travel to. When he wrote about Japan, the country of the dawn, when he wrote about Southeast Asia, Malaysia, etc., Singapore, those experiences counted for much more than anything else, any of the political briefs that we could have written. Uh, Please let me know when the 8 minutes are over. One minute. So I would simply say that to be able to have successful diplomacy, you need to understand people, and for understanding people, writing about the people, literature is the most effective instrument that ever exists. And fortunately, there are people in this country who have used this instrument, and I do hope that it will be used more often in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Goel. You see, David Puig, Ambassador of Dominican Republic, will be participating in one of the events. Who writes? Then I had told Mr. Rao to invite wife of Slovenian ambassador, who is a poet. So there are lots of diplomatic writers who are posted in India. We can invite them next time. Now I'm going to invite Ambassador K. Abhay, who is not only a diplomat author, he has combined his own experience, own being as a author from the rural base, from Delhi, from urbanization to the global sphere through his literature. He has done lots of compendiums, edited books, original books, etc. So all the three things we'll hear from him now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Uh, so I'm going to share with you basically the relationship between poetry and diplomacy, not as such literature and diplomacy, but more specific poetry and diplomacy. So poetry and diplomacy, for example, have a lot of things in common. And I was wondering why there are so many diplomats who are also successful writers. And one of the reasons I could find was that both as a poet and as a diplomat, you deal with words. That's what you do. And when you spend lots of time with words, you know, finding exact words, then it becomes almost a habit to choose your words very carefully. And that's what I think poets and diplomats they share in common, that at least one thing they do is to choose their words very carefully. So I ended up doing a ABCD of the similarities between poetry and diplomacy, and uh, A stands for ambiguity. You know, as Emily Dickinson said, "Tell it, but tell it slant." That's what poetry means. That you are not direct. You are using metaphors. You are using so many other things, so many figures of speech actually to convey uh, what you want to say. And both poets and diplomats they use that. So when a diplomat says something, it's not very direct. It's not it's a language which is subject to interpretation. And so do the poets. When there's a line written, you can read that line. I mean, you have to read through the line actually, and you have to really interpret what does exactly the poet mean. B is for brevity. Both poets and diplomats they try to say more using less words. And poetry, as is said, is essential language. It's the language which is so concentrated that everything else is shed from, which is from a sentence, from a stanza, from a line which is not needed. Poetry, as you know, is an art of chiseling. It's like making a making a statue, and poet as a sculptor does the work of chiseling. So does a diplomat. All the diplomats who are on the dais, they would they would agree with that, that when there's a draft, any draft, a note, or maybe a note verbal, or any form of diplomatic communication, there's a lot of editing to the initial draft, and there are lots of changes between the initial draft and the final draft. So brevity, I mean, try to express more through few words. We have then also, I mean, I have seen that this being a poet has helped me, whether in Kathmandu or in Brazil. In Kathmandu through Poemandu, which used to be a monthly session for poetry at the Nepal Bharat Library, or in Brazil where we used to host Chá com Letras, or in Madagascar we used to have this Lalitana. So as a poet, I was able to connect at a deeper level with the people than as a diplomat. As a diplomat, you can make friends, but you can only get to a certain degree of proximity. But as poets, you can connect more strongly. And in these places, even though I have left these places long time ago, I still have friends and people those who write to me. So I think it was helpful for me to poetry was helpful in making me a better diplomat, and vice versa. I would not have been able to write any of those books I have written. For example, whether it is The Eight-Eyed Lord of Kathmandu, or The Alphabets of Latin America, or The Magic of Madagascar, or Monsoon, a poem which actually begins in Madagascar and connects all the Indian Ocean islands and the Indian landmass, Indian subcontinent, through a poetic thread which follows the path of the monsoon. So all these books I would not have been able to write if I was not a diplomat. So for me, being a poet and being a diplomat, they complement each other. Being a diplomat makes me a better poet. It allows me to experience the places I would never imagine to be at the first place if I was not a diplomat. For example, Madagascar or Brazil. Generally, people don't travel to these places for tourism. So so these are some of the, I have a to z of the similarities. Those of you who are interested, I can share with you. But also, this is a very little known literary secret, which very few of you would know. But there are at least half a dozen poet diplomats who are also Nobel laureates in literature. And I'll give you some examples. Uh, for example, Gabriela Mistral, who was the first Latin American to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature, was also a diplomat. Or Pablo Neruda, for example. Or as Ambassador Khatua was mentioning about Octavio Paz, who happened to be Mexico's ambassador to India for at least 5 years. And he was here at the Sahitya Academy. He's written so much about India. One of his, so many poems about Lodi Garden and Delhi. There is uh, George Sefaris, the Greek ambassador to UK. There is Saint John Persay, who was also the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Croix d'Orsay in France. There are many other examples, uh, but these are some of the main examples of poet diplomats also being the literary flag bearers of their their countries. So, uh, so I'll rest my case here that the complementarity between poetry and diplomacy, and I would be happy to answer if you have any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Abhay. In his short presentation, he talks about how he has converted his personal experience, travel, and staying in a country and dealing with the country, people, politics, and realities into literature. Now, because we don't have much time, now let me invite Ambassador Arun Sahu, another erudite author, has many publications to his belt. Let him speak about his writing career, why he writes, and other things, whatever he feels like, as far as diplomacy and literature is concerned. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of you. You can hear me? Hello? Can you hear? Good afternoon to all of you. Now you have given me 8 minutes. Let me try to make your next 8 minutes something meaningful interaction with me. I, there are three things that I would like to tell you. I don't know how many of you know literature, but how many of you know how diplomats approach literature? There are three ways of looking at it. Diplomat, writer. When you ask somebody, what are you? The answer is, I'm a diplomat first and a writer second, or a diplomat writer. A writer diplomat. So the person who is an ambassador of a country, who is a writer essentially, but not a career diplomat, his answer will be, I'm a writer. Government of such and such country has posted me as ambassador. And third, how do you use literature as part of diplomacy? So there are the three major distinctions that I will make, And Ambassador Khatwa sir had asked those three questions. I have actually presumed that you will ask those three questions, so I'll respond to it. Uh, I have written in my short, writing life. There was a question saying whether you become a writer after becoming a diplomat, or you are a diplomat first, and then you become a writer. I'm a writer first before becoming a diplomat. And the person actually who published my first short story is sitting here, and he's the first editor in Odisha, in Bhubaneswar, and he runs a magazine which is very famous in Odisha. In fact, it's the number one fiction magazine in Odisha. And he is the person who identified me. He located me, saying, "Why don't you write?" After I became ambassador, diplomat. So writing, I think, is a talent, or is a drive of human being, which either you are born with, or you have that sensitivity as a child, or as a young, as somebody who has a different take about what is happening around that. So as a child, I was always told by my mother that he is a loner, he doesn't have friends, तो उसको परेशान मत करो. That's the only defense that he she will say always. Why do you bother him? Let him be in his own world. And that's how I wrote as a student, as a college student, and as youngsters, as you enter into teenage. I think every teenager falls in love, and then becomes a poet. And whether you are actually a poet and you write serious poetry and you take literature seriously in your life is known only after you fall in love, get married, have a family. Even after that, if you write poetry, then you are actually a poet. And that is how I look at it. At this age, after 26 years in Indian diplomacy, if I am writing, that means I was originally a writer. So that's why I write. And today I write in Hindu. I write in various online literary poetry websites. Sometimes whatever comes to my mind whenever I travel, I write about many things. And it's not I have not written a novel, but that is what I intend to write at some point of time when it comes to me. And then I think. Answering the second question, that how diplomacy as a profession actually sharpens your writing skill, or what you were writing, is very different, because ordinary human being, ordinary traveler to a foreign country, does not get the kind of insight that a resident diplomat actually gets. As an ambassador, or as a diplomat, higher level diplomat particularly, you have access to the highest of the political echelon to the lowest. So you meet the president, prime minister, and downward you also meet people on the street, in the park, in a dinner, in a restaurant. And if you said that identity, that I am only an ambassador 24/7, and talk to people, you will actually get the essence of human existence in various situations, in various cultures, and in various political trauma. That's a very interesting aspect that I have noticed. You know, I was there in China, and living in China is fascinating. I've written short stories about my own experience. I lived in Iran when there was Green Revolution, and during those revolutions, uh, the houses which were broken were very adjacent to the place that I was living in. So I am privy to all those. But as a diplomat, as an author, as a traveler, you can actually write 10 pages about this whole thing. That this is what I went to, you know, Tehran, and I saw this and that and all this. As a diplomat, I don't have that liberty. So what I do, is I write the same thing that you are trying to say, the same trauma that you are going through, but in a way using the language. So that's what literature is, two aspects. It's your creativity and your language. Everybody asks me, many people in my lifetime in Odisha and abroad have asked me, how do you write in two languages? I write in Odia and English. My answer to that is, if you're good in your mother tongue, you are actually good in your second and third language. So if you want to be really good in your second and third language, you must master your mother tongue. This is also scientifically proven. If you ask a speech therapist, he'll actually tell you the same thing. And that is why we always insist or look for something where a child is actually taught in his mother tongue. First, if you have control over it, then you have control over your thought, and language, second or third language, learned language, becomes only an instrument to express it. So whether you are expressing it in English or German doesn't matter. It's important what you are saying. How you are saying comes second. And I think diplomacy has taught you as a profession how to say it. You have put me in this stage. I hold a position. There are many things that in my mind which I will not be able to tell you. But I want to tell you. How do I say it without saying it? That becomes part of my literature. So if you read, this is to give you an instance. When I was doing my second master's in King's College London, you know, uh, the first paper that I wrote had all oblique indirect sentences. So the professor called me and said, whatever you have written, there is no description, there is no example. You are presuming that the reader actually knows everything. I said, but that's how we write in diplomacy. He said, no, no, you are a student now. So you write the way a research scholar will write. Rather, so I learned the difference between how we write, as Abhay said. There are many things we'll tell you, so it's important for you when you read something which a diplomat has written, what more than what he is saying, what actually he is not saying. So read between the lines what he is saying and what he is not saying. The same event you might say in 200 pages, but a diplomat will start writing the same thing, express the same emotions, express the same messages, and give it in 50 pages. That's how editing for us is the lifeline. We do not write anything which is first draft. It will go through 20 different drafts, and there are cases where I might ask Avoy to read the whole thing, even after 10 editing. So Abhay will do another two editings, and he'll say, sir, we'll give it to somebody else. So by the time it comes to public knowledge and before you, I think this has gone through 20 editing. Editing. This is again another professor who had told me that you write lots of things, people write lots of things in the world, but editing is really the key to good writing. Thank you very much. I'm ready to answer.
Thank you, Arun. As we know, daily living, passing the routine is life. Life is filled with experiences, events that confronts life, problems. As a diplomat, how I confront all these and express this in other areas is also relationship between diplomacy and literature. Now I'm inviting Anju Ranjan, a woman diplomat. She has more than me. So, for example, when I'm talking about as an individual, that's what I'm saying about. She does all those jobs plus more. Therefore, we want to hear from her. We had terrific women fiction writers, late Nina Sibal, Sangeeta Bahadur. They are very well known. And among the others, like Sangeeta Amrita Rattan from Sri Lanka. Therefore, let us hear from her about her experience, what she writes, and on diplomacy and literature. Thank you, Anju. Please come.
मंच पर आसीन हमारे श्रद्धेय सीनियर्स, अमरेंद्र खटुआ सर, सुरेश गोयल सर, my dear Arun sir, my colleague Abhay, and my dear Vidisha. मैं अपना वक्तव्य हिंदी में देना चाहूँगी। जैसे अरुण सर ने कहा कि जब आप मदर टंग में बोलते हैं और अगर आपका मदर टंग बढ़िया है तो आपका दूसरा भाषा भी बढ़िया होगा। मैं हिंदी और अंग्रेजी दोनों में लिखती हूँ, पर मैं आज आपसे हिंदी में संवाद करूँगी। मैं भारतीय विदेश सेवा की 2002 बैच की फॉरेन सर्विस ऑफिसर हूँ। मेरी पोस्टिंग सबसे पहले जकार्ता में हुई, उसके बाद मैंने काठमांडू, बीरगंज में मैंने काउंसुल जनरल का पद संभाला। मैं एकमात्र फॉरेन सर्विस ऑफिसर हूँ जिसने 3 महाद्वीपों में इन अ रो काउंसुल जनरल का पद संभाला, नेपाल, एडिनबरा और साउथ अफ्रीका। तो मैं अपने आप को बहुत विशेष और बहुत अधिक ब्लेस्ड मानती हूँ। मेरे ऊपर बहुत अधिक कृपा है सबकी कि मुझे ये सेवा करने का अवसर प्राप्त हुआ। मैं अपना वक्तव्य एक सवाल से शुरू करना चाहती हूँ। आप लोग में से कितने लोग हैं जिनको पता है अहमद कथराड़ा कौन है? नहीं पता? आप लोग में से कितने लोग हैं जिनको पता है नेल्सन मंडेला कौन है? देखिए, नेल्सन मंडेला और अहमद कथराड़ा ये दोनों दक्षिण अफ्रीका के अपार्थाइड फ्रीडम फाइटर थे। नेल्सन मंडेला जेल में 27 साल रहे, उसके बाद वो वहाँ के राष्ट्रपति बनाए गए। अहमद कथराड़ा उनके साथ ही उसी जेल में उसी अपराध के लिए 27 साल रहे, और वो भारतीय ओरिजिन के थे और उनके बारे में कोई नहीं जानता, भारत में तो कोई नहीं जानता। तो मेरी जो लिखने की जो यू कैन से कि लिखने का जो ये हुआ, मन हुआ, वो इन्हीं कारणों से हुआ कि भारतवासियों के बारे में भारत में बहुत कम हम जानते हैं, उनके योगदान के बारे में हम बहुत कम जानते हैं, खास करके जिन्होंने विदेशों में अपना इतना अमूल्य योगदान दिया है। वो मुझे प्रेरित करता है कि मैं उनकी कहानी भारतीय लोगों के समक्ष लाऊं, भारत को मैं उनकी कहानी सुनाऊं जो भारत से इंडेंचर्ड लेबरर्स के रूप में गए थे दक्षिण अफ्रीका, और वहां से उन्होंने भारत के लिए क्या योगदान किया, जिस देश को उन्होंने अपनी मातृभूमि बनाई उसके लिए उन्होंने क्या योगदान किया। इसलिए मैं लिखना चाहती हूँ। दूसरी बात, जैसे सर ने कहा कि मैं एक महिला डिप्लोमेट हूँ, तो मेरी जिम्मेदारी और अधिक बढ़ जाती है। मेरे पति जो है भारतीय इंडियन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव सर्विस में है। मैं अकेले 3 बच्चों के साथ हर जगह पोस्टिंग में रही, तो ऑब्वियसली मुझे जो बिछुड़ने की जो पीड़ा है अपने परिवार से, अपने पति से, अपने बच्चों से, वह भी मुझे अपने देश के बहुत करीब लाता है। वह भी एक कारण है कि मैं अपने देश को सबसे अधिक मैं अपने देश को मिस करती हूँ। जब मेरा फ्लाइट जो है दिल्ली छोड़ता है तो मुझे लगता है कि मैं अब दोबारा कब अपने देश आऊँगी, और मैं बहुत रोने लगती हूँ, मैं बहुत भावुक हो जाती हूँ। तो मेरी जो किताबें हैं वो इन्हीं भावों पर आधारित है। जो मेरी पहली किताब है प्रेम के विभिन्न रंग, उसमें सबसे बड़ा रंग जो है वो अलगाव का है, बिछुड़ने का रंग है, वो विरह का रंग है। दूसरी जो किताब है विस्थापन और यादें, वो तो आपको समझ में आई होगा शीर्षक से। उसमें जो कविताएं हैं 60 के करीब कविताएं, वो सब विस्थापन की पीड़ा से जुड़ी हुई हैं कि कैसे आप विस्थापित होते हैं तो अपने देश को किस किस तरह से याद करते हैं, आप उसके बारे में सोचते हैं। तो लिखने का सिलसिला ये है। डिप्लोमेट्स की जिंदगी, हमारे पहले जो स्पीकर्स ने कहा, आपको बड़ा रोमांटिक और बढ़िया लग रहा होगा, आपको ये नहीं समझ में आ रहा होगा कि हम किन चैलेंजेस के साथ काम करते हैं, हमारे पास कितना चैलेंज होता है, और वहाँ पर हमें अपने देश के एजेंडा को आगे बढ़ाना होता है। हमें अपने लिए ही नहीं, अपने देश के लिए और उस देश के हितों की भी रक्षा करनी होती है। डिप्लोमेट का काम ये सिर्फ नहीं है हम अपनी कल्चर को उन पर थोपे, अपने एजेंडा को उन पर थोपे, हम अपने एजेंडा को आगे बढ़ाएं, लेकिन उन देशों के साथ हमारा सौहार्दपूर्ण रिश्ता और आगे बढ़े, हम ये काम करते हैं। ये मिस्टिफाई करने की जरूरत नहीं है कि डिप्लोमेटिक जो सर्विस है वो स्पेशल तो है, लेकिन उसमें हम क्या करते हैं, हम यही करते हैं हमारे देश की जो भी, चाहे वो राजनीतिक हो, चाहे आर्थिक हो, चाहे सांस्कृतिक नीतियां हो, उनको हम उस देश के सामने कैसे प्रस्तुत करें, उनको हम कैसे आगे बढ़ाएं। उदाहरण के लिए, अगर भारत और दक्षिण अफ्रीका का ट्रेड मेरे जाने से पहले 10 बिलियन यूएस डॉलर था, और मेरे आने के समय अगर ये 17 बिलियन यूएस डॉलर हो गया, तो ये मेरा अचीवमेंट है। तो इस तरह का हम काम करते हैं। लेकिन जैसे कि अरुण सर ने कहा कि आप फिर शाम को क्या करते हैं, जब हम एकदम ये काम करते हैं, शाम को हम अपने देश को याद करते हैं और इस तरह की कविताएं लिखते हैं जो रोमांटिक होती हैं, जो पढ़ने में अच्छी लगती है और जो हमें दोबारा अनेक अनेक अर्थों में अपने देश के साथ जोड़ती है। एक और जो अभय ने बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट बात उठाई कि हम अपने देश को न सिर्फ याद करते हैं, उसके बारे में लिखते हैं, बल्कि विभिन्न देशों में हम जाते हैं, उनकी संस्कृतियों से, उनके बढ़िया पर्यटन स्थानों से हमारा साक्षात्कार होता है। वहाँ के स्वाधीनता के रंग, उन लोगों के जीवन में क्या क्या चीज गुजरा है, किन किन चीजों से वो गुजर के आए हैं, उसमें से निकलना और उसको पढ़ना और उसको अपने देश में परिचित कराना। तो अभी जो मेरी आने वाली किताब है उसमें मैंने रॉबर्ट बर्न्स का, जो बहुत ही प्रसिद्ध स्कॉटिश कवि हैं और जिनके कविताओं को आप अर्ल लैंग सैन को आप लोग फेयर पे गाते होंगे, उसको मैंने हिंदी में ट्रांसलेट किया है। वो किताब साहित्य अकेडमी निकाल रही है, उसके लिए मैं उनका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करती हूँ। इसी तरह अपार्थाइड पर मेरी किताब आ रही है, जिसमें भारत के ओरिजिन के लोगों का अपार्थाइड स्ट्रगल में दक्षिण अफ्रीका में क्या योगदान था, उस किताब का मुख्य विषय है। अभी इसका प्रकाशक नहीं मिला है, पर मुझे लगता है विषय इतना रोचक है कि जरूर मिल जाएगा। इसी प्रकार मेरी जो कहानियां हैं, कहानियों में मैं उन मानवीय मूल्यों को खोजती हूँ जो बदलते परिदृश्य में भी मानवता को स्थापित करते हैं। बदलते परिदृश्य में आप कैसे भारतीयता की रक्षा कर सकते हैं, कैसे भारत के लोग एडजस्ट कर सकते हैं उन मूल्यों से, और किस प्रकार से आप अपने जीवन मूल्यों को, अपनी संस्कृति को किस प्रकार थामे आप विदेशों में रहते हैं और क्या उसमें ढांचागत चेंजेस करते हैं ताकि आप वहाँ के लोगों से अडेप्ट कर सकें। तो मेरी 2 कहानी संग्रह भी आने वाले हैं, तो उसमें यही तरह की कहानियां हैं। आपको मौका मिले तो जरूर पढ़ें। एज ए डिप्लोमेट जो हम काम करते हैं उसके बारे में हमारे कुलीग ने बताया, बहुत अधिक बताने की जरूरत नहीं है, हमें बहुत कम समय दिया गया है। मैं बोलने में बहुत माहिर हूँ, अगर मौका मिले तो हम 1.5 घंटा बोल सकते हैं, परंतु उतना बोलने की जरूरत नहीं है, थोड़ा बोलना अधिक समझना। हम यही काम करते हैं, कोई बहुत विशेष काम नहीं करते, अपने देश के एजेंडा को आगे बढ़ाते हैं, उसके बारे में लिखते हैं और वहाँ के देश की संस्कृति से भारत को रूबरू कराते हैं, इसलिए हम लिखना चाहते हैं। तो इंडियन जो डिप्लोमेट्स हैं वो अच्छा लिख रहे हैं, उनको अपने देश के लोगों से जोड़ने के लिए आपके लीडरशिप की जरूरत है, आपके स्नेह की जरूरत है, आपके समीक्षा की जरूरत है। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद अंजू जी। See, when we are talking about a thing like diplomacy and literature, it's a very interesting topic. As I said, one side you have international relation related books. Other is each individual, what experience he is going through, what he is seeing, which country he is visiting, which language he speaks. Say, for example, I have 2 books in Spanish. I write in Spanish, 2 collections of poetry. Abhay is good in Portuguese. So many of us also write in those languages. Basically, what happens is that in the sphere of literature, we bring our own novelty, we bring our own weakness, we bring our own newness. Let me invite Vidisha. Vidisha works in the President's Secretariat and in the press sector, and her book will be coming soon, she has promised to us. I invite her to speak on diplomacy and literature.
So you've made a prediction now that I will have to live up to. I have to say, I am the odd diplomat out on this stage. Of course, the first thing is that I'm surrounded by diplomats of a much greater eminence and pedigree than I am. But the more specific reason that I am the odd diplomat out is because I am not yet a producer of literature. I have not written yet. And when I was speaking to the chair earlier, I said the reason I'm here perhaps is that I am a consumer of that literature. So perhaps I'll take a few minutes to turn the theme a little bit on its head and give you a rather personal insight into literature and the diplomat rather than the bigger scale that we've been talking about. The lives of us as diplomats, is not measured out in teaspoons, as the saying goes, but it's measured out in what we call very prosaically postings. So our entire lives get split into a 3-year, 4-year division. And that's how we plan and live out our lives. And that's how we look back on our lives. We think back of our time here and there, and our lives are spent preparing for one encounter with the new, returning from one phase, and then preparing for the next encounter. Now, there are stages in that journey. And for a diplomat, I think like me or like most of my colleagues, those stages are where the personal choices of a diplomat in their movement comes into play. For instance, when you prepare yourself to go to a new place, once you find out that that's your new assignment, there are two different kinds of approaches that my colleagues can take. One kind of diplomatic colleagues is the one who will go straight to the official brief, to the fact sheet, to the very technical description of that country's relationship, and go through all of the official documents very diligently and be very prepared officially for that assignment. The other type, and I suspect that the ladies and gentlemen on this stage as well as me are of the other type, which is the moment they find out where they're headed next, they will reach their nearest library or do a quick search if it's today, and they'll try and find out who are the poets and the short story writers and the books that they can read about a place. If I was traveling to Istanbul, for example, I would not reach for an official brief on the city. I would go and read Orhan Pamuk. Nothing could prepare you better for an encounter with a new place or a new culture than that culture's written word or art. So that is the difference in approach that a lot of us have to potential encounters with the new. And I want to widen our notion of what we say when we say literature here. Literature, to me, I'm taking this to mean cultural and artistic stimulus. So that could be the written word, that could be performances, that could be paintings, that could be folk art, as was mentioned here. An openness to that and a willingness to absorb that is what makes us, I think, better able to serve our duties better once we get to our place of posting. The next stage for us is normally making ourselves at home at a new place. That can be an extremely lonely experience. For somebody like me who did a lot of my postings initially on my own, nothing acquaints you to your own true nature like walking in the streets alone of a new foreign city and trying to negotiate with streets and its people. Nothing makes you more aware of yourself and more open to all the stimulus around you like that experience. So once we're there in a new place of posting, that is our currency. Our currency is to share what we have to offer by way of our cultural resources and to take in as much of what surrounds us, because that makes you better deal with your counterparts. One of the things that in my postings is I've reached out to all of the diplomats from other countries that are posted in that country and started book clubs. It's a wonderful way of assimilating and learning from those who are around you, and it makes your job much easier because then you're speaking their language, you're talking about things that they're interested in, and that's something I think a lot of our colleagues here will have done in their time abroad. So not only enriching yourself, but working to ensure that those networks are built wherever you go, and of course those networks stay with you for the rest of your life. Those networks that are of shared literary interests or artistic interests, they stay with you for the rest of your life and enrich you in everything that you do. Again, once you come back, you've heard so many examples of when you leave a country behind after having stayed there for 3 or 4 years, it makes a little home in your heart forever. And so for the rest of your life, all of your output is colored and shaped and nurtured by your time there. And by the end of a long diplomatic career, you have so many rivers of thoughts and ideas and influences that enrich the way you see the world. And that is a huge takeaway for us in the diplomatic community. One very quick afterthought just to answer the chair's question about what is it that makes diplomats perhaps more prone or more sensitive and open to these influences. A lot of these aspects were mentioned, but I think the main influence is the concept of an encounter with the new. Throughout history, it is where new civilizations have come face to face with each other, or new cultures of or ways of thinking have brushed up against each other, that is when new artistic productivity or creativity has come out. And I think we are doing that constantly in our lives. And so that is what makes perhaps a diplomat's pen or a diplomat's mind a little more creatively fertile than some of our other professional fields. So that I think is important. And also the fact that a lot of us are the concept of being isolated and away from home, as you just heard from the speaker before me, is a huge stimulus to hold on that much more strongly to what makes your culture special and to make sure that you are able to propagate it and spread it and share it with those that you are tasked to work with. So those are my two brief observations from a personal standpoint about diplomacy and the diplomat. But broader questions, I'm sure, sir, will guide us through it.
As Dr. Rao said in his introduction, this is the first time this kind of topic has been introduced in Festival of Letters. I think many of you will have comments, observations, or questions. And most welcome. We have about 8 to 10 minutes.
So we have 10 minutes. So all I request
And
whoever
please make it brief.
and ask a question. Any kind of a comment discussion we'll have later.
That's not a question, a clarification from Ambassador. I just missed 2 points. You talked about A, B, C, D. A for ambiguity and B for brevity. What are the C and D?
Please send me your email. I'll send you A to Z. Well, C is for its conciseness, I mean, it's a concentration in the sense that you have to work around your language so that it becomes very concise. It's different from brevity. So it's more like picking the right word, choosing. C is also about choice, it's being very careful about choosing choosing your words. So what I said that, one thing which diplomacy teaches you to choose your words very carefully, and so does poetry. One wrong word in a poem and the whole poem is gone. So that's then also this D is for dialogue. I mean, as a diplomat and as a poet, like, you have to have a dialogue with as a poet, you have a dialogue with about the people you write about. You talk to them, you understand them. It's also interdisciplinary dialogue in the sense that you have ekfrax, you have the art having a dialogue with art. So you have these paintings influencing poetry, you have music influencing poetry, you have, so this in diplomacy too, you have this dialogue where which is very important. So I have worked it around, thinking, and I can share it after the session. Please meet me outside. I'll give you the jet. Okay.
I'm Professor Hare Krishna Satpathy, member of General Council of Sahitya Academy. As after having heard the poetic contributions of from all the distinguished diplomats, as now it is clear that it goes without saying that diplomats can be the best literary artist if they want, because of two reasons. The first one is they have got vast experience in respect of, as the chairman told, in respect of international relations and cultural exchanges, etc., etc. And the second important reason is that they are bestowed with divine poetic talent. Each man is endowed with a divine poetic talent. But while analyzing this thrust area, diplomacy and literature, since it has been newly introduced as a component in our National Festival of Sahitya Academy, may I suggest that when we refer to the diplomat literary artist, then the literature gets confined to the post-independent era, or you see this diplomacy and other things. But so far as our poetic tradition of our country is concerned, literature on diplomacy was there from time immemorial. When the Vedic seers uttered a mantra, Jatra Bhavati Vishwam Eka Nidam, which has been adopted by Rabindranath Tagore while establishing Vishwa Bharati, and Ano Bhadrakra Tavo Yantu Vishwataha. So at that time, I think, and when we analyze the literature written by Kautilya, that is related to diplomacy. And if you analyze Ramayana and Mahabharata, the best Duta ambassador is considered to be Hanuman, and his salient features of an ambassador have been described by Valmiki. Bahu Byaharata Nena Nakinchit Apasabditam. He has never used a word which is against the civilized use of the proper use of the words. Anyway, so I think whether we can confine the contents of this subject to the jurisdiction of diplomats and literary writers, or we can expand this jurisdiction by throwing some lights on literature that has been created in this sacred land of the country from the Vedic age, that literature and diplomacy. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take note of it. I'll inform Sahitya Academy. But as you said, Iliad, Odyssey, Ramayana, Mahabharata, they are literature involving diplomacy. You are right. But as this is the first time it has been introduced on time, you have only 1 hour. Probably that was the limitation. I'll tell Dr. Ram. You can expand.
One more gentleman want to ask.
Yes, yeah, please. Dr. Sarjit Dudeja. Sir, the way we talk of literature is an illusion. जैसे बोलते हैं कवि जहां ना पहुंचे रवि वहां पहुंचे कवि. Do you think that diplomacy also like a illusion or a utopian world?
Yes, I do not know whether literature is illusion or not, because literature is based on real life experiences, and therefore, in that sense, it is maybe written in any style, but it is not an illusion. But I think diplomacy is more elusive than the literature.
Sir, we have yeah.
नहीं, आपने जो कहा कि जहाँ ना पहुँचे रवि वहाँ पहुँचे कवि, तो मुझे लगता है मेरे दिमाग में जो पहली बात आई वो यह कि जहाँ भी मतलब बाकी कवि नहीं पहुँचे वहाँ पहुँचे डिप्लोमेट कवि. तो हम लोग चूंकि विदेशों के कोने कोने में पहुँचते हैं, इसीलिए मुझे लगता है कि नई नई चीजें नई नई बातें लिख सकते हैं. तो आम कवि से थोड़ा अधिक पहुँच है हमारी, उस हिसाब से सही है. काइंड ऑफ
Question.
Yeah. I am Mandira Ghosh. Statecraft and diplomacy, they are very close yet different. So my question to all the panelists are, how you bridge the gap between diplomacy and statecraft using the mode of literature or any other arts, or primarily poetry?
I told you, like, say for example, in India, other than few of us, every diplomat has publications on international relations. 1. 2, they are discussed and that have relevance. 3, sometimes policymakers read that and get influenced. 4, there are issues like Indo-Pakistan relationship, China, crisis in Ukraine, there are some value. But whether that can be converted into the group of literature, that is an international debate. In fact, there is a very, very fine writer, Portuguese writer, Cancelos. He says, my dispatch is the best literature ever produced in the world. And his dispatch nobody reads except his seniors, who mark it very well.
Sir, Sir, we have 3 minutes. We'll take one question. Sir, only one question.
Yeah. I have gone through many diplomats' writing, and I found them very rosy writing, as if it is only for image making. But as a reader, we like reality and sometimes surreality. So I think that writing should be as reader friendly. It is and but informative writing, which is for any another country or what they have seen, that is quite useful, I found.
See, there are two ways of looking at it. If a writer, to me, I'm saying my personal judgment, that if a writer or a creator thinks about the reader, he is not creating. A creator is a leader. He will he will lead the readers where his world is. That's a good writer. That's a creator. He'll live beyond his lifetime. If he is busy thinking what my reader will think about me, what I am writing, then he is mortal, he is ordinary. So please don't, whether he's a diplomat, he's not a diplomat, he's a bureaucrat, he's not a bureaucrat, he's a professor, he's the layman. If somebody is writing, please don't push him to write for you. Try to understand what he is writing. If you don't understand, that is his problem, your problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you all of you. Coming to a topic which is diplomacy and literature, which has been introduced for the first time. And I take the opportunity to thank Sahitya Academy, Dr. Rao, team, and the participants, fellow diplomats. Thank you. See you next week.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks to all the panelists. So there's a tea outside. So all of us, let us assemble here in 20 minutes for People and Books with Mr. Munjal, Chairman of Hero Group of Companies. Thank you.